Hi friends. So today I want to talk about one of the important topics in chess, which is calculation. Um, um, I've been stressing about the importance of calculation in many of my uh, lessons I do with my students, but often it seems that not everyone agrees with me, or at least not everyone. I don't think not many students take the efforts to improve their calculation skills. And after some discussions with my students, I found out that one of the challenges they face is how to improve on it, right? So I'm going to be talking about that subject for today on how you can improve your calculation skills. And the way I'm going to do it today is by just going through a sample position and then forming some conclusions, which hopefully you guys um, can use in your own practice. So let's take a look at this position we have on the board. This position is white to play, and white's pawn is on c2, meaning that this pawn is going towards c8 right there, and black's pawn is going towards e1, right? Um, and what do we see in this position? So primarily, when we look at a position like this, we are trying to find a win for white. So this position is white to play and win. But for white to win this position, he requires to play a set of very precise moves. And a move here and there can make black, like can give black some chances to make a draw. Okay, so I'll explain my own personal thought process and how it has evolved over the years. Um, so when I look at a new position, there are some thoughts that come to your mind. You're thinking about some moves that you want to play. Some moves can seem like natural to you, and so many players feel the impetus. They get impatient and they want to quickly execute their idea without cross-checking it by their own calculations. So, for example, when I look at this position, um, few moves that come to my mind is moving the king. So obviously, white wants to queen his own pawn, right? So for white to win, he should be in a position to queen his own pawn, and simultaneously um, he should be able to stop black's pawn. So let's say, for example, white plays a move like it's a king d4. Okay, and what black can do in this position, he can start pushing his pawn. Let's say to a5. I play it to c4. He plays it to a4, c5, a3, c6, a2, c7. Be a mistake, and then black queens with a check, and white cannot queen his own pawn. So naturally, I want to queen my pawn, but I want to queen it first, right? So if black queens it first, and especially with a check, then I end up losing the game. When I say me, I say white. So white will end up losing the game. So maybe d4 is a overloaded square, because when black's pawn queens, he will give a check to the white king on d4. So maybe I try now king d5, and again the same sequence of moves happens. A5, c4, a4, c5, a3, c6, c7, queen, queen. And what we see here is that black has queen, white has queen, and there are no skewers or any tactics where by which white can, like black can get white's queen. Maybe he can start giving some checks. And white has to be a little alert here. Like obviously don't play a blunder like king c5, then it will obviously lose his queen. But maybe you can play a move like king c6. Then if he gives a check, you can protect your queen, and the game will eventually be a draw, right? So both sides have queens, and there is not a lot of material to play. So this will be eventually getting to a draw. So maybe I will play with king d5. I'll stick with king d5, but with king d5, the most white will get is a draw. And like, so one thing I can try to do as white is I can start pushing my pawn, but when I get the chance to stop black's pawn, I can try to do that. So let's take a look at this variation, right? So let's say black plays a5, c4, and after a4, white can maybe play something like king d4. And if black plays a3, then I can go king c3. If he plays a2, I can come king b2 and stop black's pawn from queening. And hopefully, like I'm hoping my pawn will queen. But in this situation, black can also try to go after white's pawn by king e4. So if he takes, black can play king d4, king b3, and then black plays king c5. And this is a very standard theoretical position for a draw, right? So even though white has an extra pawn, this is a theoretical draw. For more on this, check out my video on pawn endgames, especially the lesson number 2, king on the, sorry, pawn on the 5th rank. So check out that lesson. But this position is a draw. So let's go back and go back to the first position. So obviously we see here that if white plays c4, then black is getting his pawn to, like he's trying to queen his pawn, and then white is losing his move by playing king d4. And then white is not able to win again in this particular position. So let's go back. So what I see here is that if white keeps his king on d4, he is keeping his king closer to the black's pawn, and also is making way for his own pawn. So after exploring the move king d5 for a bit, I will again try to go back to a different alternative, let's say king d4 in this instance. So I'm now exploring king d4, and let's see if white has any chances to win here. So maybe black again tries to do the same thing with his pawn. Let's say he plays a5, I play c4, he plays a4, and now I play c5. Then after black plays a3, I play king c3. And what we see here is that white's king is within the magic square of the black pawn. So magic square is a visual concept by which you can identify whether a king can catch a pawn. So for instance, black's magic square is this particular square, right? So if magic square can be drawn by stretching out a diagonal from the pawn towards the end of the board, and then you complete the square as follows. This is the magic square, and white's king is definitely in it, right? So if he was outside of it, then couldn't have catch to got the pawn, but he is within it, and so white is able to stop this pawn. Whereas black's king is not within white's magic square, so white's magic square can be drawn again by stretching a diagonal towards the end of the board, and then I complete it by stretching another line straight from the pawn towards the end of the board, and then I complete the square in this fashion. And then there is another magic square on the other side, which is like a7. But since a7 is not the last rank, I can always include, like stretch it like this, and this is another magic square. So what magic square essentially tells us is that all if black's king is within any of this square, which is and then or the rectangle, which is characterized by this particular boundary, right? So if black's king is within this any of the squares, he can catch the white pawn. If he's not within that square, then or that rectangle, black's king cannot catch white's pawn. And we can verify that. So let's see if black plays king e4, white plays c6, he plays king d5, c7, king d6, my queen, right? And if black tries to queen, then I can always bring my king and stop the black pawn. For more on Magic Square, you can look at another lesson in the Pawn and Game series. Take a look at the series if you're interested in the topic. But let's go back. So what I'm here doing, like I'm trying to show you my own calculation process, like how I approach a given position when or like how I do calculation when I'm given a position. But having said that, I think I have to stress on the following statement is that I try to do this all in my head, right? So, and that's something new students of chess of chess should also practice. So right now I'm moving the pieces for the sake of the video, because I understand that some people might find it hard to follow if I just blurt out moves and give blindfold annotations. So that's why I'm moving the pieces. But ideally, I want to calculate all these scenarios by calculating it in my head. And so that's the way to improve your calculation. Ideally, you want to patience in your head, and then if you think you have reached the end of your own personal calculations, then you want to write them down and then verify it by moving them on the board. There are many mistakes that can happen when you try to visualize things, when you try to calculate things in your head. The most obvious being that sometimes you are just not keeping track of where the pieces are, right? So as we can see, the white king and black pawn and white pawn, they move a lot during this entire variation. And when you're trying to do it blindfold, sometimes you lose track of where each of the pieces. And for that reason, I highly recommend players to, at least the new students, to practice calculation on a minimal set of pieces. So what I mean by that is there is a tendency of new players to solve tactics and improve their calculation skills by solving a lot of tactical puzzles. But most of the tactical puzzles you see online, they have a lot of pieces on the board, meaning you have like queens and rooks and knights and bishops, and then you're trying to improve your calculation skill by practicing it with a lot of pieces. And that's not the right way, in my opinion, to improve your calculation skills. Um, they can be fun because most of these problems are easy. Like if you look at chess.com or chesskit.com, most of the puzzles on that particular site are easier to solve and they don't challenge you. And I don't think these kind of puzzles challenge you in the right way, like to improve your calculation skills. So that's why I recommend positions like these, like I have on the board, where there is less number of material on the board, but you have to keep track of where each piece is, because these positions are really precise. Also, like when you're starting out playing chess, or like if you have rating less than 1800 or 1500 rating or less than that, I think those players should definitely be looking at minimal positions, like positions which have minimal number of pieces. That was a good segue into that core conversation. So I want to come back to this particular position. Maybe we let's take a look at a few more lines. Now it happened to be that in one of the lines white is winning, but I don't think we have seen other options for black, right? So calculation means two things. Um, you have to calculate. Calculation means two things, right? So calculate your move, and I think a lot of players do that, right? So I mean, a lot of players get caught up with their own ideas and they do that. But there is a second aspect to calculation, which is calculate your opponent's move, right? And this is the most overlooked aspect of chess calculation or its response, right? Um, I've seen many of my students that when I'm training them for calculation, most of the times they are just trying to make their ideas work without taking their opponent into calculation. And that would have been fine if chess was like a one-player game, but unfortunately, it's not. Chess is a two-player game. There is white and black. And so whenever you calculate white's move, you have to calculate black's move. And whenever you calculate black's move, you have to calculate white's move. Um, we have looked at, let's say, king d4, but and we looked at one variation of black, which is what happens if black pushes his pawn in this fashion, right? Then c6 would be a mistake, but king c6 is a better move, right? And white should win here. But we looked at one variation where black pushes his pawn, but I think there is another variation uh, where black tries to use his king to stop the white pawn, right? So let's take a look at king f4. What happens if black is trying to uh, stop white's pawn um, with his king? Right. Okay, so in this scenario, scenario, white will play c4, and like he's trying to queen his pawn. Let's say black plays king f5, then again I push my pawn, and then black can play king e6. And again I push my pawn, and then black can play king d6, and he's able to catch my pawn. Right? So that's one variation. So obviously this variation doesn't work for white. So what I do in this scenario is that I backtrack. Like I take a few moves back and I try to see where I can improve white's play. So black played king f4 here, and I played c4, king f5. And here, I think there is a chance for white to improve his play. Obviously, black is threatening to bring his king to e6 and then control white's c pawn, right? So what I can try to do here is maybe stop black's king from entering to e6. So again, if black tries to push his pawn, let's say if black tries to queen his pawn, then I can play c5. He plays a4, and now there are two choices for white, right? So either he can try to bring his king and stop black's pawn, or I can just keep on pushing my own pawn. So let's take a look at what happens if white tries to stop black's pawn. So he plays king c4. Black pushes his pawn and tries to queen it. I play king b3, and now I have successfully stopped black's pawn, right? If he plays a2, I take it. But unfortunately, what happens here is that now black is also able to stop white's pawn from queen. He plays king e6. If I play king b3 back, he attacks it, king b4, and then he plays king c6. And again, we enter this typical theoretical position with the pawn on the fifth rank. And again, as I said before, this is a draw, right? So that doesn't work. So again, we are trying for white to win, right? So the original position mentioned that white can win with best play from both sides. So white and black play best moves, and still white should win. That doesn't happen here. So what I'm trying to do is, again, I'm backtracking and trying to see if there is a better way for white to continue the game. Now, after a4, one variation we looked at was what would happen if white plays king c4 and try to stop the black pawn. In that case, if after king c4, black can keep on pushing, or he can simply go king e6, which would still be a right, and then he's able to stop white's pawn, and this will be a draw. So that doesn't work. So I go back, I backtrack, and I try to see if just pushing the pawn will work. If pushing the pawn will give white the win. So c6, a3, c7, a2. Now I queen, but I queen with a check. So black's king is under check, and if let's say he removes the check, then I stop the black pawn from queening, and then on the next move I will take black's pawn and white wins. So this worked. So white is winning in this variation, and so now my job is, if my job is now try to see if I can improve on black's play, right? So we talked about these two things, right? So when you're doing calculation, you want to calculate your own move, but you also want to calculate your opponent's move. And what that and an extension of that is, you want to calculate your opponent's defenses. You want to calculate, is there a better defense for my opponent? We always try to see if there is a better plan for us, if there is a better move for us, if there is a better attack for us. But just looking half that picture is a mistake, and that can sometimes lead, not sometimes, but it often leads to some very bad mistakes. And I've had students who, who had like winning positions, but come to me after the game and say like, coach, I was winning, but I lost because this blow came out of nowhere. And that particular blow comes out of nowhere because you're not paying attention to your opponent's ideas. So that's why. So I want to go back and I want to check if we can improve on black's play, right? So okay, so I go back, and I think this is the position. Yeah, c5, a4. And yeah, so here if white plays c6, then white is winning, right? So if c6, then already white's pawn is very, very farther than black's king can catch it, right? So c6, if black plays a3, then white queens with a check, right? But if black plays just king f6, then I can still queen before black, and I can again stop the black pawn from queen. Right? So there are a few moves here that I can play. Queen a8, queen a6. Both of them should get, so I think it wins here. So pushing the pawn doesn't seem like a good idea for black. So a4, black is losing. Right? So a4 is a mistake because after white pushes the pawn, white either queens his pawn with a check, or he simply queens it first, or he simply queens it first, and then he stops or grabs the black e pawn. So if I allow that, then black is losing. So if black allows that, is losing. So um, again, we use the same strategy as black. Like, so black is trying to stop the white pawn by using his king. Right. So let's say plus king f6 after white plays c5. So here we can see the point of black's idea. So if black plays c6, then sorry, if white plays c6, then black can play king e7. And if I play c7, then black can play king d7, and again it stops the white pawn from queening. And this should again be a draw. Right. So again, white is not winning here. So again, I go back, I backtrack, and I try to improve white's play. So white plays king d6 to stop black's king from coming to e7. The idea being that, again, if black plays a4, then I continue with this particular plan of pushing my pawn, a3, c7, a2, queen, queen. And now we see that the geometry of the chessboard is helping white. And now white has this nasty skewer on h8, and black loses his queen. So queen f5, and take, and white is winning. White is a queen. So, okay. What we see here is that king d6 is the right move for white. So white playing king d6 is a good move, a good exclamation. And what? Okay, so we can try to improve black's play, right? So obviously, a4 doesn't work. If a4, then I can simply play c6 and queen white's pawn. So what black does here? Black again tries to do the same thing. He plays king f7. My idea is that I want to bring king to e8 and stop the white pawn from queening. Now, I'm seeing a pattern here, right? So if we go back a few moves, I'm seeing a pattern here that every time black's king comes up, I'm stopping the black king from coming near my pawn by shouldering it. Again, shouldering is a concept we use in pawn end games. If you want to know more about it, I highly recommend you to see the pawn end game video series. Anyway, so white is shouldering the black king from coming near his pawn. So shouldering in very small words means that I am trying to prevent the black king from coming near the white pawn, or essentially we are stopping the black king from going somewhere by using our king. Shouldering is a concept that is borrowed from football. It's used a lot in soccer, where players shoulder each other to get control of the soccer ball. Anyway, so coming back to our position, what we see here is that every time black's king comes up, I shoulder the black king. Right? So if we push the pawn and black king comes up, I shoulder the black king. So again, here black is trying to come near my pawn, and I'm thinking maybe I shoulder it again. But let's see what happens here. So white shoulders the black king, and black now has no way of coming near the white pawn. So again, black says, okay, I'll just keep pushing my pawn. So a4. And white plays c6, a3, c7, a2, queen, and queen. And here white is not queening with a check like he did in the previous variation. He doesn't have a skewer like he had in a previous variation. All he has here is like maybe a check on e8, and then black should be careful not to come to f6. That's a bad square because again there is a skewer. But I go to g7, and this position should again end in the draw. There is not a lot that white can do here. So white is not winning here, and that makes me think that maybe white has a better way to continue, or maybe we should try to find a better move for white. So again, I backtrack. backtrack, and I'll check if any of my variations or any of my moves is it correct or wrong. And obviously, like, so here we made the decision to play king d7, and then black played a4, and after that, all these moves were pretty much fixed, right? So white playing his pawn to c8, black playing his pawn to a1 and making a queen. That that was all forced. So maybe here I should try to do something else. Let's just check what would happen if I just try to push my pawn. So c6, and black's king tries to come near the white pawn. And here what we see is that white can simply play c7, and black cannot get to d8, and thus he cannot stop the white pawn from queening. Unfortunately for black, there is no square here. Like there is no d9 square. He has to go out of the board, which is an illegal move, right? So black is not able to stop the white pawn from queening. If there was another rank, let's say d9, right here, then he would have been able to stop the white pawn from queening. But that's obviously not an option to black, and so white is able to queen his pawn in this particular variation. So white is winning here. Let's see, plus or minus. And black cannot save this game. Let's see if black has any other options here. So after king f7, I play c6. Yeah, king e8, I just queen. Let's see what happens if black is just trying to push his pawn. And I play c7, a3, queen, a2, and now here I have many different ways to play, but like I just like to stick with queen a6. Now I'm stopping the black pawn from queening, right? And I'm winning here. So what this tells me is that with all of black's options, black black plays king e8. After c6, black can play king e8, or he can push his pawn on a4. There are not a lot of other logical options for black here, and in both scenarios, black is not able to stop the white pawn from queening, and then the white queen will take black's pawn. So the way I will characterize this is that when we look at the best moves for both sides, white playing the best moves and black playing the best moves, even after that, white is winning, which means that white was winning in the original position, and we already knew that, but we just had to find the right way to do it. And I want to come back and talk about our topic of the day, which is how to do calculation, how to improve your calculations. So to answer that, let's just go back at the start position and try to see what we did. Right. Promote this. So to improve your calculation, there are a few obvious things that you need to do. Like how to improve your calculation. So I would say there are a few things you can do. So first thing I would mention is that solve a lot of problems, right? And these can be like tactics or puzzles. But now it brings me to my second point. So there are a lot of tactics and puzzles to do, and still some players don't see a lot of improvement in their calculation skills. And the audience for today's lecture is mostly players who have rating below 1800. And for them, I would recommend is that you have to find the right kind of problems for you guys to solve. See, I'm a grandmaster, so for if I solve the same problems that you guys solve, it's useless for me. I have to, for me to challenge myself, I have to solve problems which are challenging to me, and so that I can test myself. And so you have to select the right kind of problems, right? To select the right kind of problems. And when you want to do that, you want to be very cognizant of your level. So we are right now talking about less than 1800, right? So for players like you, I will encourage you to solve mostly problems where there are less number of pieces. Problems with less number of pieces. Ideally, positions like we have seen today, where we have this is a problem which I call like endgame tactics or endgame puzzles, and these are really the most ideal for players less than 1800 rating to improve their calculation skills. Unfortunately, there is a lot of hype with websites and books which don't recommend the right kind of material. See, these kinds of websites are not written by experienced players or coaches. These are written by marketers and businessmen. And so they don't know a lot about just coaching or how to improve your skills. They are just trying to market their websites and books. And so for them, it's more about creating marketing and hype. And so when new students come to me, they are really they come to me after they have experienced rejection and sort of disappointment with the current literature out there, and that's why like I'm giving this free advice for uh, for the students and parents out there, that if you want to improve your calculation skills, do the right kind of problems which are suitable for your level. And that means better to do problems which have less number of pieces, because the more number of pieces you add in your puzzles, it's going to be that much harder for you. And I think the groundwork for improving calculation skills is by starting less number of pieces. So think about this, like when you're trying to solve maths, like when your kid goes to first grade, second grade, third grade, the school does not teaches you mathematics that's like derivatives, calculus, or like high level mathematical concepts. They don't just start with the Pythagoras theorem on day one, right? So you start by teaching them numbers, and then addition, then subtraction, then multiplication, and then the fourth is the division, the hardest of the basic arithmetic. And then in the second or third grade, you start by least common multiples, greatest common divisors, stuff like that. Right. So I think I'll leave a note here. It's uh, process. The process of improving chess calculation is very similar to um, to K-12 mathematics, right? You want to start by learning the numbers, then addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, then learn higher concepts. And for that very reason, I would recommend new students, like young players, to solve endgame puzzles and positions with less number of pieces. All right, so I think I feel that is a good enough advice for you guys. Like, so this is something which you can do on your own. Um, to summarize this video, I just want to go back and go over this problem again and reiterate a couple of things. So we had this original position, right? So this position is white to play and win. Let me just say that white to play. And the like the struggle for us, like we didn't have to find out if white is supposed to win. We already knew that. That was given to us. What we had to find out, or like what the exercise was to find out the right way to win. You want to find out the right moves for white, and and also find black's best defense, the opponent's best defense, and come up with a tree of variations. So that's the exercise here. And ideally, all of this should be done in your head. And I know that's difficult. Like that's the most challenging part, where you don't move pieces on the board. You ruminate, you meditate on the given position. You try to solve that in your head without moving pieces. You write down your variations, the moves, and then you verify it. That's the right way to uh, to do calculation puzzles, or to do calculation problems, or to do calculation exercises. Don't move pieces. And I know that's a hard thing to do, but this is something that if you want to become a good chess player, you just have to push through it. You have to practice it. I think that's enough material for this session. For this video. If you have any questions or any more topics you'd like me to talk on, feel free to leave it in the comments. I will also put a link to the notes. So all the variations that we talked about in this lesson, I'll make a note of it, and so that you guys can download the PDF and go through it yourself. All right. Thank you for watching.